Racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
Before Martin Luther King Jr. became the most prominent leader of the civil rights movement, inspiring generations with his dream of racial equality.
With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope.
Before he was wiretapped and investigated by the FBI, the NSA, and the House Un-American Activities Committee for his opposition to the Vietnam War and fight for economic justice.
The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home.
Before becoming the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 1963, and the namesake for over 730 streets in cities across America.
Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Martin Luther King Jr. grew up during the Great Depression in a loving household. He excelled in school, getting accepted into college when he was just 15 years old. Like his father, young Martin became a preacher and used his powerful oratory skills to fight for justice, peace, and equality as the head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Now at the time of this recording, it is Black History Month, and we thought it would be fitting to get this done. Plus, when it was Martin Luther King Day, we missed it, and a lot of you guys complained. So, here we go. What's going on, guys? My name is Michael McCred, documenting the life and career of Martin Luther King prior to his passing, here for you on Before They Were Gone. I've covered Malcolm X a while back, so it's about time I got this video on MLK done. I hope you like it, and be sure to let me know as always in the comments down below who you want me to document next.
Many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
Michael King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, on the eve of the Great Depression in Atlanta, Georgia. His mother, Albert Williams King, was an accomplished original and church choir leader. His father, Michael King, was a reverend. After a trip to Germany in 1934, Michael Sr. changed both his and his son's name to Martin Luther King in honor of their Protestant reformer Martin Luther. Who's that? Well, I talked about Martin Luther in the After They Were Gone video I did on Jesus. We make a lot of videos. People began to get access to their own copies of the Bible. As a result, people became less reliant on the church to give them the Word of God, and new divisions of Christianity emerged out of dissatisfaction with the Catholic Church. This movement will be known as the Protestant Reformation.
What happens next is the stuff of legend.
The German priest and monk Martin Luther led the first movement against Catholicism and founded the Lutheran Church. Young Martin attended nursery school and kindergarten and learned his first lesson about the evils of racism when he was just 6 years old. He had been friends with a white boy up until then, but then when school started, Martin had to attend a school for blacks, while his friend went to a school for whites. The two began to drift apart, and the final breaking point happened when the boy's father refused to let the two continue playing together. Martin asked his parents about why this had happened, and they explained racism to him for the first time. So when MLK talked about black and white children joining hands in his I Have a Dream speech, he was talking about it from personal experience.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls.
Martin grew up with an older sister, Willie Christine King, and a younger brother, Alfred Daniel Williams King. He loved music, was a member of the junior choir in his church, and his mother took him to several other churches to share his gift of singing. But while his mother was a strong musical influence, his father set an example for him to follow in life. Aside from his role as a preacher, Martin Luther Sr. was a fierce opponent of segregation. He would leave a store when he was asked to move to the rear to be served, and refused to listen to cops who called him boy. Martin's family was tight-knit, and his parents had a good marriage. He and his siblings were also very close to his grandmother, who often told him stories while they were growing up. She died when he was 12 years old, and he was so distraught he blamed himself and jumped out of a second-story window. Despite his religious upbringing, Martin was skeptical of Christian dogma as a kid. The next year, he shocked his Sunday school by denying the resurrection of Jesus. It would not be until later in life that he would come to believe there was profound truth behind what he called the legend and myths of the book. Martin became the youngest assistant manager of a newspaper delivery station when he was 13. He also got an early start in high school, attending Booker T. Washington High. There he was a member of the debate team and took home his first prize in an oratorical contest. He skipped both 9th and 12th grades of high school and passed Morehouse College's entrance exam when he was just 15. As a result, he was still a teenager when he graduated Morehouse with a BA in sociology. From there, he enrolled at Crozer's Theological Seminary, graduating in 1951. While at Crozer, Martin fell in love with a white girl. She was the daughter of a German immigrant who worked at the school's cafeteria. While he planned to marry her, he was warned about the potential burden their interracial marriage could have on both their lives. He then broke off the relationship, but continued to have feelings for her. One of his close friends would later claim that he never recovered from the heartbreak. But when Martin was 24, he married Coretta Scott. The two had 4 children together: Yolanda King, Martin Luther King III, Dexter Scott King, and Bernice King. For his doctorate, Martin studied systematic theology at Boston University, while he graduated in 1955 without incident. It was later discovered that he plagiarized portions of his dissertation. I guess even MLK cut a few corners here and there. We all do it. Martin's first significant contribution to the civil rights movement began in 1955. In March of that year, a 15-year-old pregnant girl named Claudette Calvin refused to give up her bus seat to a white man. This inspired Rosa Parks to do the same in December of that year, and she, well, was arrested.
Go ahead to the back.
No, I am not going to move.
E.D. Nixon organized a bus boycott and recruited Martin to serve as a spokesman. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted over a year, during which Martin's house was bombed and he was arrested. Eventually, the United States District Court decided that the segregation was unconstitutional and made a ruling that ended racial segregation on Montgomery public buses. The next year, the Supreme Court upheld their decision. Martin helped to found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and was elected its president in 1957. He held the position for the rest of his life and rose to become the most prominent civil rights leader in America, fighting for racial equality and to end the Vietnam War. Also for economic justice. In 1961, Dr. King and the SCLC joined thousands of citizens in a nonviolent resistance to segregation in Albany, Georgia. Demonstrators were arrested en masse, including Martin himself. He was sentenced to 45 days in jail or a $178 fine. King chose the jail time to help draw attention to the problem, but 3 days into his sentence, he was kicked out of jail after his fine was discreetly paid by Billy Graham. The Albany movement carried on for nearly a year, but fizzled out with nothing to show for their efforts. How sad. In 1963, MLK led a coalition of civil rights groups in a new campaign, this time in Birmingham, Alabama. Early on in the Birmingham campaign, Martin was arrested and jailed. From his cell, he wrote the letter from Birmingham jail, in which he laid out and defended his strategy of nonviolent resistance to racism. In it, he points out that the Boston Tea Party was illegal and everything Hitler did was legal, so unjust laws should not be followed. Martin's strategy in Birmingham was to provoke man's arrest with a series of marches and sit-ins. The Birmingham Police Department responded to protest with high-pressure water jets and attack dogs. Images of the violence used against the protesters were broadcast nationwide, shocking the public. The head of the Birmingham Police Department, Eugene Connor, he was fired, and Birmingham's public space became more open to blacks. The same year, Martin was among Big Six civil rights leaders to organize the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was here that MLK would deliver his most famous speech, which in its initial prepared text did not include the words "I have a dream." The whole portion was improvised on the spot.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
The demands of the march were for Washington to end public school segregation, protect civil rights protesters from police brutality and racial discrimination in employment, and guarantee a $2 minimum wage for all workers.
It ought to be possible, in short, for every American to enjoy the privileges of being American without regard to his race or his color.
President Kennedy, who supported these goals, had actually called for a Civil Rights Act in a speech 2 months prior to the March on Washington. But before it could happen, Kennedy was assassinated. Lyndon B. Johnson became president and urged Congress to pass the Civil Rights Bill as soon as possible.
I urge every American to join in this effort to bring justice and hope to all our people.
While the Senate debated the Civil Rights Bill, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X met for the first and last time. They had both come to the US Capitol on March 26, 1964 to hear the debate take place. Eventually, the Senate decided to soften the Civil Rights Bill and passed the slightly watered-down version on June 10th, and it was signed into law by LBJ on July 2, 1964.
and thus reaffirms the conception of equality for all men that began with Lincoln and the Civil War 100 years ago.
But the fight was not over for MLK. In 1964, he helped to lead campaigns in Selma and St. Augustine, Florida. The next year, he returned to Selma for the March on Montgomery on March 25th and delivered his "How long, not long" speech.
How long, not long?
Yes, sir.
Because no lie can live forever.
Yes, sir.
How long, not long?
How long?
Because you shall reap what you sow.
In 1996, he ventured to Chicago to help spread the movement to the north. In 1967, he made an appearance at New York City's Riverside Church to deliver a speech against the Vietnam War.
I would not say that the civil rights movement is dead. It's simply that we are moving to a new phase of the movement.
In 1968, MLK turned his focus to economic justice, beginning the Poor People's Campaign. Its goal was to use his familiar strategy of nonviolent civil disobedience to pressure Congress to pass an economic Bill of Rights for all Americans. But in the midst of the campaign, Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was shot by James Earl Ray on April 4th, 1968, and died in hospital at the age of just 39. He will be missed.
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
As for the rest of the story, well, it lives on in his legacy, because this is before they were gone. Now, if you guys want me to continue this story and talk about how he changed the world, we could do that in an After They Were Gone video. We've done that on a select few people, like Elvis and Hitler and Harambe. Be sure to let us know who's next down below. Browse around the channel. We've done people like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Barack Obama, and Jesus. Plenty of videos. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Oh, ow, I hit myself.